And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com, brought to you in part by Yahoo.com. Check out their DFS offerings as always. Dan Strafford, Adam Scher along with you on this Tuesday morning. Emac and I switching days as I come back from what was an awesome vacation. Like if you can just sort of take the days away from home, amazing. Getting to away from home, Adam, was a different story. 9-hour delay on the way out, a 6-hour delay on the way back. So I was 15 hours delayed, but with 3 children.
I was going to say with kids, right?
Yeah. So, and mind you, my kids can be terrible, as all kids can be, but they were very, very quote unquote good during the delays. They complained. I complained. Hell, I'm sure people saw me on Twitter. But nonetheless, we made it through. Awesome experience to go down to Universal. My oldest is a big Harry Potter fan, so we got to enjoy all of that. But back here in the fold for some DFS goodness on the DFS Early Bird. How are you doing on this Tuesday morning?
Doing good. 2 more baseball slates before I head out to Nashville for the NFL draft and get a little break from everything. So getting excited for that, and hopefully can put together a good winning slate before I leave.
Are you a Ravens fan? A Redskins fan? Redskins fan. So, I mean, they're a kind of fucked franchise to begin with. So what are you expecting here in the draft?
I have no idea. I don't follow it at all. It was just an excuse for my married friends to get out and go to Nashville. And apparently next year it's in Vegas. So they thought it ahead. And they were like, well, if we go this year in Nashville, we all love Nashville anyway. But,
right.
If we go to Nashville this year, then next year it's a tradition and we can go to Vegas. So
that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's more just a long con excuse to be able to hang out with my married friends.
The long con is the best con because that's the one that usually comes through, to be quite honest. So I will also make a movie recommendation right now for probably everyone listening. The Sting is a Robert Redford movie that everyone should watch if you haven't watched it before, which is all about the long con and horse racing. So it's a good one. But that sounds like fun. You're flying out Wednesday?
Flying out at 6:40 Thursday morning. So probably getting a hotel in D.C. tomorrow night just because I'm too lazy to trust myself to get an Uber that early on Thursday morning.
That's fair. So Adam will be out of pocket, which is what we call in the corporate world when you're not in the office for the weekend. I'm actually covering for Adam on Friday's podcast, so you'll get me and EMAC Friday into Saturday. But nonetheless, fun week for those of you who are NFL fans. All the rumors starting to swirl, and I'll be honest, I'm going to pat myself on the back if Arizona does not take Kyler Murray. I've been on that train since the start. If they end up trading that pick or drafting someone else, I will. I'll be like Stephen A. Smith. I'll just say some random BS, and it'll come true, so it'll be fine. But let's get into this 13-game slate. There is a lot to dig through as we record late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. FanDuel isn't giving us much. Lots of pitchers who are not pitching are already listed. So we'll do our best. I'll do my best to reference FanDuel pricing, but a little bit of a mess over there currently. We'll use DK as our starting point. We'll go through pitching first and then go through each position. As always, Adam has the write-up Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Vacations and travel not to be considered there. And then you get Lofty Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You get EMAC sprinkling in some content as well. You get Josh on the live shows and some of the Spags videos as well. And you start doing the 4 corners for baseball. It's like there aren't. I mean, it's a diamond. I guess there are 4 corners. Like I guess that makes sense. But we gotta talk about the branding here. At the top end, well, I actually want to ask you this first. We are nearing the end of April, right? So we're April 23rd as this one goes out. Sample sizes, data, are you making any adjustments at this point? Or are you making any changes to how you're bringing your numbers into your spreadsheets and making your MME files? Or are you still following sort of the same thing you've been doing since the beginning of the year?
Still doing mostly the same thing because, I mean, I still want to have my projections based on most of the time, years of data and, still appropriately weighting previous years. But I do at this point start to look a little bit more into Baseball Savant and Brooks Baseball and stuff like that for pitchers. It's something that for the first couple of starts, I didn't do a whole lot of just because I think that you start like when you're just looking at one or two starts, it's really easy to just find things that aren't there. And so I try to just avoid it unless there's something like really weird going on, like, Jordan Lyles suddenly striking out 10 guys a day. I was like, okay, I'll go ahead and look at what Jordan Lyles is doing differently and see if I can figure it out. But in general, I feel like one or two starts, it's tough. Once you start getting 4 or 5 starts, I'm more interested in digging a little bit deeper into stuff.
Agreed with that. And as we go through this slate and all the slates, you're going to start to hear more 2019 data come up as we try to talk through exactly how this season will play out, but even more so how the individual slate will play out. We do have a doubleheader on this slate, on this day. So we'll do our best to talk through that. You can always count on some weird lineups coming out. Sometimes it's the early game, sometimes it's the late game. That will probably play in a little bit for that Detroit and Boston doubleheader on Tuesday. But let's dive in here. On the top end, you get Kenta Maeda, who is 10K flat on DraftKings. Jose Quintana, who is fine. I'm actually a season-long fan of Quintana, but he's 9,700 on the slate against a Dodgers lineup that can put up a ton of runs. Zach Eflin, 9,400. Patrick Corbin. You have Williams at 8,300. First glance here, Adam, what's your overall thought on the pricing? And then we can dive in on the top end of pitching. Do you feel like this is tight pitching pricing where we're really going to have to make some decisions, or does DK open some things up here?
It seems pretty tight at the top, I think. Like when you look at guys like Zach Eflin, Kenta Maeda, Jose Quintana, they are pitchers that I like. But when I first, look at their price point, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I think that they do a really interesting job with Patrick Corbin at 8,800 because, he's in cores, but he's, clearly a really, really good pitcher. And that's a really interesting, decision point, I think. But overall, I think the pitcher pricing is pretty tight on DraftKings.
Yeah, it's been a tightening of the belt over the past week or even 10 days over on DK. I guess it's actually been 2 weeks now that it's been tightening up the top end of the pitching market to really understand where we're going. No real aces on this slate. We're not looking at a Scherzer. We're not looking at a DeGrom, and I know they're both injured. But we're not looking at the guys at the top end, so we're going to have to make some choices on really where we feel most comfortable. So you have Maeda against Chicago, Quintana on the other side of that one, both at the high end. Eflin, you get down to Ponce de Leon for St. Louis is 8K. Zach Wheeler against Philadelphia has some clear upside at 7,900. Jeff Samardzija in Rogers Center isn't someone I'm overly intrigued by. Swanson, Montes, and we go on from there. So let's talk top end first. Let's go 8K or above. So Ponce de Leon for St. Louis all the way up to Maeda. Who strikes your fancy the most?
So you said from Ponce de Leon up to Maeda?
Yes, sir.
Patrick Corbin.
So talk me through, if you can, so horizontal versus vertical break on pitches in Coors Field. We hear about a lot. I think analysis has gone a little bit messy when it comes to pitching in Coors Field. As more and more people learn about it, it can become a little bastardized and understanding exactly what's going to influence the way you make decisions. Not the end-all, be-all, but do you like Corbin's quote-unquote stuff playing well in Coors Field?
Yeah, and I think that what you said is a really good point. It's not that I think his stuff plays well in Coors Field. It's that I think it plays less bad than other stuff. And I feel like that does it. It gets completely blown out of context because, it used to be we can't roster pitchers in Coors, and then it became in vogue to start trying to do it. And, it's, we can't roster guys with curveballs in Coors, but we can still roster, these other guys. It's a terrible situation for anyone. It's just that pitches that have vertical movement that rely on vertical movement tend to flatten out more in the altitude, so they become even less effective than hard fastballs or hard sliders, pitches with velocity that don't rely on vertical movement as much. So that's what it is. Like a hard fastball and a slider don't lose as much effectiveness from the altitude, but you're still pitching in a giant ballpark where the ball flies and balls in play just fall in for hits. So it's still not like it's good.
I still marvel at the fact that people don't understand that doubles and triples happen a lot at Coors Field. Like it's not just home runs. The outfield is gigantic, and
right.
the idea that Billy Hamilton doesn't play in Coors Field still blows my mind. Like, Billy Hamilton is the ultimate Coors Field outfielder, and Coors Field hitter. Like, give him the lines and let him just put it in play and let him run. And that he belongs in Coors Field. But I think it's a great point. So now this for you, Corbin, price point play and a play where do you think ownership is down? Do you think people bite the bullet here? How do you feel ownership plays out for Corbin?
I hope it's down. If it's not, then I lose a lot of interest there.
Right.
Because, rostering popular pitchers in Coors, just take the batters in Coors. You're going to come out more often than not, you're going to come out ahead. But, Corbin, the way this slate breaks down too at the top end, Kenta Maeda is good, but he's not, lights out or anything, especially we do have some lefties in the Cubs lineup. Quintana, the same thing against a good Dodgers team. Zach Eflin against a bunch of lefties for the Mets. Those are the three guys more expensive than Corbin. You don't have like some ace up there to give you a really high opportunity cost. So Corbin clearly is the best pitcher out of that group. And then right below him, you have, Trevor Williams, who's nothing special. Ponce de Leon's nothing special. Luke Weaver looked good last start, but he's, not great. There's just not a lot of talented pitchers on this slate. So getting the discount on Corbin and being able to roster, far and away the most talented pitcher is really appealing.
I want to make sure I'm looking at the right stats, but the Mets have been pretty good against righties on the year. Again, sample size notwithstanding, and if I'm reading correctly, a 325 weighted on base average. You can take that for what it's worth, a 163 ISO. I actually like some of the Mets bats here against Eflin in a spot where Eflin may be higher owned. I don't know I'm going to get to Corbin. Honestly, I think he's been great. I was down on Corbin signing with the Nats. I got why they went after him, and they're trying to go a different route with Harper clearly leaving. I did not go after him in any season longs, but this is a spot where I think Adam hit it. If ownership is down, he's the one name here, 8K and above, that I feel more comfortable with. Any interest in someone like a Luke Weaver against Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh's been pretty actually solid, but Weaver's coming off of a very solid back-to-back outing, 23.3 DraftKings points and 30.3 DraftKings points, 9Ks, 8Ks respectively, pitch count in the 90s, a bigger ballpark, not necessarily a pitcher's park, but one that does forgive some fly balls. He's at 8,100 here on DraftKings.
I have some interest in him. Normally I don't, but he's someone that I at least want to dig into further because he has had a couple of good starts, like you said, and more specifically because I saw, Saris on Twitter during Weaver's last start just talk about his stuff being – his secondary pitches seeming much, much better over his last couple of starts. So that's something I want to at least dig into, quickly pulling it up. He had a 16% swinging strike rate against Atlanta, which obviously is phenomenal, but the three starts before that, including the most recent against San Diego, it wasn't anything special. So I still don't think I'm sold at first glance, but it's something I'll dig into more. The price point and the ballpark are appealing. I do think, though, that, Zach Wheeler is, to me, a more talented pitcher than Weaver. Very tough matchup against Philly, but I think that, at a similar price point to Weaver, I have interest in Wheeler, and then the same for Eric Swanson going into San Diego. Just a guy that throws strikes, has decent stuff against, a right-handed heavy San Diego team. I don't think that Weaver stands out above those guys. At best, I think he's very comparable.
Are you still doing things like WOBA minus X WOBA in your projections? Are you looking at things like that, or have you gone a little bit more intricate in how you're determining some of these upside plays?
I'll probably start using it a little bit more now that we're further into the season.
Okay.
But I mean, more often than not, like I know that the projections I use go back, multiple years and, regress to what we expect the player to do. So I don't really want to be bumping guys up just because they're hitting the ball hard for the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
And their expected WOBA is higher than their actual WOBA because that's already more or less accounted for in my projections. Like if they're hitting really poorly or if their stats are really bad this year, I'm not discounting them already in my projections. So.
Well, I mean, that is such a great point in every day in projecting baseball. And you talked about Osmo's projections, which you can get by subscribing and using the promo code EARLYBIRD, get you 50% off your first month. You talk about these things. They can't be then separated to then take into consideration X WOBA minus WOBA or whatever it is again.
Right.
Like, you have to understand that these projection models that are being built are incorporating all of those data points. So to then add on top of it the same data again, you're skewing the numbers you're looking at. So you
Right.
want to make sure that you're not confusing those things.
Right. For example, like, and quickly, but the only real manual adjustments that I make are, so I didn't create my own projection system. Depending on the sport, I aggregate or
You
I
paid
use
me, and
other
we
stuff.
can
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can be open about it.
Right.
I did it for you. It's fine.
But yeah, I mean, to me, it's at this point, there are enough publicly available projection systems that are good that my time was better spent figuring out how to best use them to win tournaments. But so I don't want to, adjust them for things that are happening like XWOBA, but I will adjust like StatCast data or pitch type data. I know doesn't go into the projections that I use. And so if I find a hitter that, matches up great against the pitcher, I'll go ahead and bump them up a little bit because I know that's not already incorporated. And more often than not, I make adjustments to pitchers because they do change so frequently from start to start or whatever. There are a lot of times where I just don't really want to be weighting, what happened 3 years ago with my pitcher nearly as heavily as what's happening right now because he's a completely different pitcher than he was. So I'll make changes there, but you want to, if you're going to manually make changes to a good projection system, you want it to be to incorporate something that isn't already incorporated.
Right. And you want to be aware of that, not
Right.
just be sort of willy-nilly making adjustments to try to get different from the field. You want to do that in ownership. You want to do that in lineup construction, not in the way you're projecting the slate. Let's go 8K and below. So you talked about Zach Wheeler. This is a Philly team that has obvious pop, but Wheeler's probably underperformed what his ceiling is on the year. He's 7,900. Jeff Samardzija is at 7,800 out of San Francisco at the Rogers Center. Not exactly somewhere I'm overly comfortable rostering him. Swanson against San Diego and Margevicius. You have Montes against Texas. What do you like? Let's say mid-tier. We'll go 8K down to 6,500. My boy Andrew Kashner on the slate. He's 8,500. That's 6,500. Sorry, Kashner. Anything above 5K blows my mind. But let's go 8K down to 6,500 and Andrew Kashner. Anybody strike your fancy there?
Some interest in Wheeler just based on talent. Like
Right.
He's got really good stuff. I hate taking guys against Philly, but it can work out. And right now their lineup is banged up. They don't have Gene Segura, they don't have Scott Kingery. You're getting Philip Gosselin and Roman Quinn in the lineup on a regular basis. So not quite as intimidating a matchup. Wheeler does a very good job of limiting hard contact to righties. And so, should be able to help neutralize McCutchen, Hoskins, Real Muto, and Michael Franco. So really you're worried about Bryce Harper here. So at that price point, I do have interest in Wheeler. I have interest in Swanson just because it's a almost all righty San Diego lineup. He profiles as a perfectly decent pitcher. So I don't mind him there. And then Trent Thornton against San Francisco. Thornton's been, all over the map in terms of his production this year. 2 really good starts in his first 2 times out, 2 bad starts most recently. But San Francisco's not a very good offense, and Thornton has done a pretty good job of getting swinging strikes, 12.6% swing strike rate to righties, 10.3 to lefties. Nothing special, but I think he has the advantage against the Giants probably.
Yeah, a WRC plus of 57, 129 ISO for the San Francisco Giants. Again, making sure I'm calling up the right data here. But Thornton's the kind of guy who, from an anecdotal standpoint, I want to target simply because of the past 2 starts. I feel like his ownership will be down, and this is a spot where he could exceed expectations and have very low ownership projections. So I'd be happy to have him at 7K. You do have Lois Saiga against the Angels. You get a nice ballpark bump here for the spot start against the Angels of Anaheim. My good friend Made Wiley, also known as Wade Miley, is against the Minnesota Twins at 6,800. Nova against Baltimore. Can we rot? So we've targeted Baltimore, right? That's become a thing. We know that Baltimore's offense struggles. Sorry, Adam, but we know they struggle. Nova just doesn't strike people out. So is it 6,600? Is that a low enough price point for a whip guy, or is that too much of a struggle for someone like Ivan Nova?
I'm interested in him because So for one, I don't think Baltimore is very good. Obviously, nobody does, or you shouldn't. But also, there's at least some chance that we see better strikeout stuff from him this year.
Yep.
To righties, so last year he threw a curveball 24% of the time to righties. This year he's throwing a slider. He had a 16% swinging strike rate on the curveball last year, but the slider so far has a 22.5% swinging strike percentage. He has almost a 13% swinging strike percentage to righties overall. Again, we're talking about 200 pitches, but it is a new pitch for him. And he's also still throwing the curveball 12%. So you're talking about throwing a breaking ball to righties now almost 40% of the time. I had a lot of him in his last start against Detroit. He struck out 2 guys in the first inning, and then I don't think he struck out anyone the rest of the game. But I still think there's a chance that improves. And even if it doesn't, you're talking about a guy that probably or possibly could just go 7 innings, of 3 or 4 strikeouts and be perfectly fine at this price. So I don't hate the idea of getting him in tournaments. Just, it's obviously risky. The more right-handers there are in the lineup for Baltimore, the more I like Nova.
And what have you made of Homer Bailey on the year? He's at 6,200. We drop into the cheap tier. You do have Tampa Bay with Jalen Beeks, and I love DraftKings with the pitcher long relief designation there for Beeks, and I'm sure that will disappear, and we'll get the opener listed as time rolls on. Still, I struggle with whether or not DK should be doing this, but we'll talk about that at a different time. Homer Bailey here against Tampa Bay, which has been a very solid offense. It's been a team that has led the AL East from the jump, but Bailey's shown a little bit of upside, and at 6,200, is he cheap enough, or does he continue to be cheap enough to be an option here?
Yeah, I will have some in tournaments. I'm sure as hell not going there in cash games or anything.
Yep.
The ballpark helps because we know that he struggles with power, and Tampa Bay is one of the least power-friendly parks. It is a scary Tampa Bay lineup. His splitter has been getting swings and misses this year, and that's been really good to see. He's picked up strikeouts in most of his starts, and the splitter has a 20% swinging strike rate to righties. It has a 15% swinging strike rate to lefties. One big concern for me, though, is if you look at his velocity start by start.
Yep.
His first start of the year, his fastball was at 93 miles an hour average. Then he averaged 94.2 in his second start, dropped to 92.8 in his third start, and was all the way down to 91.4 in his most recent start against the Yankees. There's a big, big difference between a guy throwing 91 and a guy throwing 94. And when you already are as questionable as Homer Bailey is, that really scares me. So, it's a pretty tepid recommendation. It's similar to like Matt Harvey on last night's slate.
And that is as tepid as it can get. Let's talk position. Well, any other pitchers? I know I sort of hit on the names that popped out to me. Anybody else outside of Andrew Cashner, who's clearly the best pitcher ever? For those of you who don't know, I've joked with Derek Carty, who's over at Roto Grinders, for a long time about Cashner, just because it's fun for me to poke fun at Derek Carty. He has no love for Cashner, but it's fun for me to imply he does. And that's why I continue to talk about it, just for context. Anyway, anybody beyond the names we've talked about that you have interest in that I may have forgotten to mention?
I don't think so. I'm trying to see if Hector Velasquez is stretched out because Detroit is pretty damn bad.
Yep.
He started his last game against Baltimore, which was on the 15th.
57 pitches.
Okay, yeah. So 3 innings with 57 pitches. I mean, I don't really think that I want someone that's probably going to throw like 70 pitches.
Right. You need a highly efficient 70 pitches, and that's not who Hector Velasquez is.
Yeah.
So,
Michael Pineda, I guess, is in play too at 7,100. He got lit up last start. His velocity hasn't been great this season, and he's got a terrible matchup against Houston. But the price tag, accounts for all of that, I think.
Yeah, he was one of those that everyone was dreaming big things as his early season returns came in. And then as the pitch count went up, surprisingly, things unraveled for Mr. Pineda. Home runs have started to follow. Let's go position by position. What we'll do here is we'll roll through, do our best to pick out some of the top names at each spot. Clearly, the more expensive guys will have some good matchups here if the pricing is on. As Adam writes, the deep dive, that's where you get some more insight. Of course, you get the MLB strategy show in the morning. But even further, you get the write-up, and then you get the deep dive with Adam and Dave Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. And then you get live before lock, leading up to lock time. It's been a mixed bag of NBA and MLB as we roll through the NBA playoffs. but that gives you more insight, understanding of where these guys at least are leaning with some of their ownership and some of their lineup construction. Let's talk catchers first. You have, Willens Studio at 4,200 seems like a high price point, but the guy has just done a good job of producing when he's in the lineup. Hasn't always been a high efficiency, but has put up doubles and enough hits here to string some things together for the Minnesota Twins. You have the likes of Realmuto at the top. Suzuki against Bettis in Coors Field is going to be highly priced. And then we get into the mix where you're sort of hunting and pecking for the best cheap option. What do you got at catcher?
Astudillo, assuming he's in the lineup, is always interesting to me just because he never walks and he never strikes out.
Yep.
So a guy putting the ball in play 4 or 5 times gives you a good chance for points. I don't like taking hitters against Miley all that much because he's gotten so good at limiting power. But Astudillo is still interesting. Tom Murphy, if he's in the lineup against Nick Margevicius, I still don't buy into this guy. And he doesn't miss bats. And Tom Murphy has power. So I have, some interest in Murphy from Seattle. I think that Wellington Castillo against your boy Andrew Cashner is, Cashner doesn't miss bats and Castillo has a ton of power. And the same thing goes for Mike Zunino, who's facing Homer Bailey. Get some swings and misses from Bailey, but he's also home run prone, and we know Zunino has more than enough power to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you're at this point looking for a catcher in a good spot, meaning a catcher in a position in the lineup that can give you some RBI opportunity. Not seeing a ton on the cheap end, but wait for lineups to come out, as we always say, and see where you get a nice lineup bump. You, from time to time, get, Crandall was up in the 3 slot on Monday night because Moustakas was out. So sometimes you get a catcher at a cheaper price point who may give you some upside. On first base, you have Cody Bellinger, who's up to 5,700. He has a lefty-lefty matchup against Quintana. Haven't looked a ton at his lefty-lefty matchups on the year, but a price point that I just rather stay away from when it's not an optimal handedness matchup for someone like Bellinger. But the power is always there, and if you can make it work, great for you. Pete Alonso has been really dynamic for the Mets. Tons of home runs on the early season. Eflin at 5K, though. It's not necessarily that loaded a first base position, but there's clearly some upside in certain spots. Who are some of your favorite plays?
Yeah, the position's not as deep as normal. If you start in Coors, you have Ryan Zimmerman at 4,500 against Chad Bettis. Bettis isn't terrible, but he's certainly not good, and Coors is Coors. So I think that's a really fair price tag once again on Ryan Zimmerman. Either one of the White Sox first baseman, Jose Abreu, Yonder Alonso facing Cashner, is really nice. It's a position though where I think I'm probably going to pay down a lot because you have guys with power that are cheap. One other mid-range guy that I do like a lot is Encarnacion against Margevicius, but you have Chris Davis at $2,700 against Ivan Nova. I'm on board with the Chris Davis kind of turn things around thing. I've seen other people talk about it, and I think it's coming. During his cold streak, he was really starting to hit the ball the other way and hit it hard, and he was just getting unlucky. I know he got robbed of a home run the other day. He's just still really cheap, and you're talking about a pitcher in Nova that works down in the zone and pitches to contact, and those are two things that worked in Chris Davis's favor. So that's a cheap guy with some upside. You have Mark Reynolds is inexpensive, tough matchup against Corbin, but he's pretty cheap. You get Kendrys Morales is 3,200 against Lance Lynn, who is not particularly good against lefties. So I think it's a position where, spending down a little bit makes sense. I did overlook Justin Smoke at home against Jeff Samardzija, who I think is terrible. So he's another mid-range guy I like.
Yeah, Samardzija seems like the perfect pitcher for, Oracle Park? I keep getting that wrong. Where he's good enough at home, but just on the road, somebody I'd like to target. Davis over on FanDuel is what, 2,100? Is that? Yeah, 2,100 on FanDuel. So again, not somebody that I'm necessarily thinking is a cash game option, but the upside's clearly there, the power's there, and the matchup's a +1 at a price point that is pretty damn cheap. Any thoughts this early on? And I don't know that I want to roster him against Pineda, but about Anthony Rizzo's struggle with the batting average. Do you feel like this is a guy that's simply just going to play to the back of his baseball card and get up around 270, 280? Or do you see something wrong with Rizzo on the early year where we should be concerned even as his price point continues to plummet?
I had no idea he was even off to a bad start. So I always assume that guys play to the back card. So I don't usually get that bogged down in how they're doing. There are like a lot of times when I get asked, questions like that, I'm just like, oh, he's not hitting well. Like,
right.
Okay.
Well, his numbers are interesting to me more so, and maybe I can answer my own question of the hard to hit data is there. Like the numbers just bear out the batting average isn't. Like it's a number with Rizzo where I'm not concerned. So 4K still seems a tad high against Meta, but he's the kind of power bat, talking about a cheaper power bat at first base. I might be interested here. Like this seems like a guy who's going to be owned at very low single-digit ownership with power upside because people are going to look at that batting average, look at recent game logs and say, oh, he's not been that great and stay away. But I like him as a random first base option here at 4K on DraftKings. Haven't looked at his price point. But you're going to have me on Chris Davis, and that's going to annoy the hell out of me when I have roster lock on Tuesday night.
For whatever it's worth on Rizzo, his expected WOBA so far against right-handed pitching is 30 points higher than his.
Right. And like it's all there. Like, and that's the thing. I think early on we as DFS players, we try to stay away from batting average, but as the general population, you have to understand people still look at game logs and they still look at, oh, he's batting 197. What's wrong? And I think that's an interesting point to at least dive into. At second base, yeah, Pineda against Altuve. So I'm assuming the Houston bats at least will be a stack that intrigue you if Pineda blows up, right? Like this is just a place where Astros can be a high upside play, right?
Yeah, especially if either people aren't on the Astros or even better for this scenario, people are on Pineda.
Right.
Leveraging or at least getting low owned guys is really key in baseball tournaments. So, whenever you get even if it wasn't Pineda, I'm always interested in the Astros because they're so good. And if people aren't going to roster them, I'll take one of the best offenses in baseball against anyone. But with someone like Pineda, we still really don't know what he is at this point. He's made 4 starts. He missed the entire last season. So, and even when he was good or whatever you want to call what he was with the Yankees, I always thought he was good. Other people didn't. But even then, he struggled with home runs. So it's still like a pitcher that can get blown up.
Oh, I'm forgetting who he was traded for.
Jesus Montero.
Nice. Well, nice poll. That's well done. And the ice cream sandwiches, right? That was the whole Jesus Montero story when he was in Seattle.
I don't think I knew that.
Oh, yeah. There's like a story about him throwing an ice cream sandwich at someone in the dugout or something. Yeah. I'll have to look that up and post it. But
speaking of top prospects that just flamed out immediately.
Yeah, but then you talk about top prospects who flamed out, but then found that Alex Gordon is having a hell of a start to the season.
Yeah, he is.
If he figures things out, all of a sudden, 7-8 years after he was supposed to be the next coming of George Brett, that'll be a fun story to talk about. You get Altuve low VR is 4,900. You get a guy like Garcia against Cashner at 4,500, and then you always have to consider the Coors Field bats, obviously, wherever they come into play. D. Gordon is 4,400. Someone like Lowe stands out against Bailey to me at 4,800. It's a higher price point I'm not enthralled by, but who do you like at second base?
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Lau is my favorite second baseman. He's got a lot of power. Bailey gives it up, gives up a lot of power. So,
Let's get him a damn headshot on DraftKings. Can we do that?
I didn't even realize he doesn't have one. That's amazing.
It's his number. It's just the number 8. Freaking infinity sign. Good job, DK.
His price tag's definitely getting up there, and it's not a good park, but I think he's legitimately good. Former 3rd-round pick, and has shown plenty of power. So I like him. Brian Dozier's too cheap for Coors Field. He's like 4,400 on DraftKings facing Bettis. If you don't have the money for Brandon Lau, you can get to Joey Wendell for like 3,500, probably hitting 4th or 5th against Bailey. And then Gleyber Torres is 3,900. He's, I think, just too powerful of a hitter to ignore that price tag at second base, especially against somebody like Chris Stratton, who is far from unhittable.
If I made a Mr. Wendell Arrested Development reference, would you understand that?
I've seen Arrested Development. I don't remember the reference.
No. Oh, man, you went there. That's interesting. There's a song by the rap / hip hop group Arrested Development called Mr. Wendell.
Oh,
Google it later.
okay.
Google it later. You'll enjoy it. They're a great band. Like they're one of the bands I recommend the most for people who have not heard them before.
Well, I'm glad I didn't say like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I'm not EMAC, so I appreciate that. Let's go to third. Again, Adam has your write up. We're going sort of top level here. Adam will be on top of his write up, and you also get him on the deep dive. Lawfield will be on the strategy show. So you get both takes there. You get Josh's thought process thrown in, and you get EMAC's write ups, which I think he does most days, sort of the free takes he has on some lineup construction and some fantasy cruncher stuff over there at awesemo.com. Again, early bird is your promo code for the website for 50% off your first month. It's amazing. I'm off for a week and I'm losing my voice doing my first podcast back. Third base is up next. Rendon's been day-to-day with that elbow issue. He's in Coors Field. If he's healthy and playing, fine. Same with Arenado against the lefty. No, Adam talked up Corbin before, but I can quote you the ISO, the WOBA, the slugging, all of the crazy numbers Arenado has at home against lefties. Corbin's good, but Arenado's better. And so not saying Arenado's top third base play, but he is one of them, whether he's facing Corbin or Wade Miley or whomever it might be. Moncada gets Cashner, which stands out a bit here at 4,900. Chapman against Lynn, Cabrera against Montes. What do you like at third base?
Definitely with you on Moncada, and I'll throw in that Nicky Delmonico is 3,500 on DraftKings, and I have no idea why he's a third baseman, but he is. So
has he played third base?
Not that I know of. I know he played first base last year, and he's been an outfielder.
Yeah, he was an outfield first baseman. Yeah,
it's entirely possible that because I don't know what position guys play. I don't really look at it. It doesn't matter to me. But just looking at like the lineups that they've been running out, like they have Moncada, they have Sanchez, they have Anderson, they have Abreu, and they have Alonso. So I don't think Delmonico's playing third base. I think their infield's pretty full.
I mean, it says on his Wikipedia page, which maybe that's where DraftKings is pulling their player data from. Nicholas John Delmonico is an American professional baseball third baseman for the Chicago White Sox.
Really?
I'm gonna have to. I have not known that he's played third base at all this year, but I might just be.
Well, they just called him up too, so.
Oh, maybe he's been playing at minor. Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he was probably playing in the minors. Is probably what it was. But I mean, again, like I didn't look, but I don't know who's like unless they moved one of their infielders to the outfield so that Nick Delmonico could play third. He's not playing third.
Well, we got him here.
He's still listed as a left fielder and first baseman.
All right. Well, Jimenez, Eloy Jimenez is going to the bereavement list, which brings up Delmonico. So he should be in the lineup. Jimenez is out, and so you should get him here. Nice point out here at 3,500 on the DFS early bird. Manny Machado's at 4,200. You get Devers against Turnbull. Matt Carpenter against Davies at 4K. You get Bryant at 3,900. Third base feels a little deeper than first base felt.
Yeah, for sure. And you can also throw from the other side of that Baltimore game, Rio Ruiz, another left-handed bat with some contact issues, facing Ivan Nova in Camden Yards at a cheap price tag. Same story as Chris Davis.
You don't often see third base outfield, but there it is for Nicky Delmonico. So,
according to Baseball Reference, he has not played a single inning in his major league career at third base.
That's amazing. I'll have to check out his minor league data. But also, at what point as an adult do you drop the E? Like, I was Danny growing up, and I quickly became Dan when I was in college and doing radio. Do you think Nicky Delmonico just never grew up? Is he a Peter Pan guy? Like, what do you think happened there?
Well, and it's weird because like all these guys, like when they refer to each other in interviews, it's always with an E.
Oh yeah, well,
but they never actually go by it.
Right. Well, that was, Joe Girardi managing the Yankees. Everyone had a Y at the end of their name.
Right.
Gardy and Birdie. I'm like, what the hell are you even saying, man?
Right.
You're just making crap up at this point. Anybody? Well, I mean, you've named a couple of off the radar guys, so I think we don't need to go too much deeper here at third base. Let's talk shortstop. Let's see what we got at the top end on DraftKings. It's Trevor Story at home, not surprising. Against Patrick Corbin is your most expensive at 5,200. Anderson for White Sox at 5,100. Listen, Tim Anderson's a guy that has always had the tools, quote unquote, but has started to piece things together for the White Sox this year and last year too. Had a very solid season. But 5,100 is one of those price points when my biases set in that I feel very, very much pause paying. Anderson against Cashner, I assume in a stack, you have no problem paying that, right, Adam?
I mean, yeah, I don't in a stack, but if you're talking about any sort of optimal play, he's $100 less than Trevor Story in Coors
Right,
Field.
right. You get Adalberto Mondesi at 4,800 against Tampa Bay. It looks like Beeks will be the long reliever. Haven't seen who the opener is as of yet. Mondesi is a talent, and so I don't mind rostering him on any given slate, but not sure at 4,800 he gives you much value here on a gigantic upside. You scroll through Semyon's against Lynn at 4,300. Not necessarily interested there. What about someone like Corey Seager, lefty-lefty matchup at 4K against Quintana? Do you trust him in the middle of that Dodgers lineup, or do you assume that lefty-lefty Quintana will be too much?
Yeah, I mean, Quintana's been good against lefties even when he was bad against righties the last couple of years. So I like the price tag on Seager, but I don't think I'll end up going there. But shortstop's a tough position today because the guys that you want to roster are expensive. You know, Story's expensive. Mondesi's expensive, and his first at bat's probably against Ryan Stanek, which isn't good. It's a tough position. I do think that if I'm looking for someone in that 4K range, I would lean towards Eduardo Escobar at 3,900 against Trevor Williams. Not a great park. Williams isn't someone I love to pick on, but I think Escobar is just a little bit better than the price tag.
You brought up Joey Wendell before as well. He has dual eligibility here on DraftKings. He's at 3,500 against Homer Bailey. This Tampa Bay team's for real, so don't be afraid to roster them where the matchups tell you to do so. Let's close it out with some outfield talk. You have the MVP of Major League Baseball, I don't care, National or American League, Christian Yelich is at 5,800. Bellinger at 57. Mike Trout, pretty good at baseball too, gets Lois Saiga in Anaheim Park there, 5,500. Haniger against Margevicius, 5,400. Obviously, we can talk down the line here, each of these great potential plays, but top end, let's say 5K and above to start. Who's your favorite outfield bat? 5K, so Joey Gallo on up.
Let me see. All right, so I mean Mike Trout because he's Mike Trout, but if we ignore him somehow being the third most expensive outfielder, it would be Juan Soto.
So you get Soto at 5K flat against Bettis in Coors Field. You get Charlie Blackmon on the other side of that one against Corbin at 4,900, lefty-lefty. Blackmon's hit well against lefties in his career. Again, Corbin's the kind of guy I like a lot. I like Adam's call of 8,800, but if I'm going to get the Rockies bats at supremely low ownership for whatever reason, I like Blackmon as part of that stack to be ignored by more people than he should be. Adam Eaton is 4,800 in Coors Field. Not surprising there to have him a higher price, but Robles, 4,700. You know all these Washington bats are going to be part of the conversation. What do you think of Michael Conforto here against Eflin?
I like him, and I also like Nimmo. Eflin will give up some power to lefties. It's not a great park for power, but both of those guys have plenty of it. So I like Conforto and Nimmo both.
You get Michael Brantley here at, what was that, 4,700? Is that what I scroll by, or is he cheaper than that? Brantley's 4,500 against Pineda. Again, if you're projecting the blow up and looking for home runs, a good matchup there for Michael Brantley. And then you get into the likes of Brett Gardner against Stratton at 4,300, bigger park there. Maybe his wheels can work. Clint Frazier, same matchup. You're getting even cheaper. Kiki Hernandez against Quintana at 4,100. Quintana's been good on the year. What do you like? Let's say 4,500 to 3,500. Anybody? Well, let's say 4,500 and below on DK.
All right. So I'm going to round up first and take Bryce Harper at 4,600.
Oh, well, fair.
Just because that's a stupid price. But then, moving beyond that, I had so David Dahl, lefty-lefty is not great. Ian Desmond, 3,500. That's just cheaper than really anyone should be in Coors. So I don't mind the price tag on him. Nomar Mazara at 3,700 against Mata. Same goes for Shin-Soo Choo at 4,300. He's not a bad pitcher, but they're just guys that have power and they're good hitters. So I'm fine with them, even with the ballpark downgrade. Cole Calhoun leading off against Loaiziga. I think he's a decent pitcher, and Calhoun is, I have no idea if he's a good hitter or not, but he's cheap, so I think he's fine.
That's going to do it for today's podcast. As always, find us over at awesemo.com. Find Adam over on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. You can find him over on awesemo.com Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, giving you the deep dive, his write-up of each slate. And as always, find him on the MLB Strategy Show when he's not writing. So take that to be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, he's writing. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he is on the show. And then the deep dive, he's on Monday through Friday, other than when he's traveling the end of this week for a trip to Nash Vegas, setting the stage for a trip to Vegas the following year. Congratulations to all of his friends who thought that through. With that said, find me on Twitter at Dan Strafford, and of course at awesemo_com for our website. Wish you the best of luck on Tuesday's slate. Back with more tomorrow morning right here on your DFS Early Bird.